So, I used to work the night shift at a small motel, and this happened almost 2 years ago. But I still think about it all the time, because it genuinely terrified me. And to this day, I do not know what that guy's plan was, or what he was trying to do. Honestly, my stomach still knots up when I remember how long he was inside, before I even realized he had no business being there. The motel was small, just 2 floors and about 30 rooms total. It was not a busy place. We usually had maybe 8 to 12 rooms occupied on weeknights. I worked from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. It was usually pretty boring and quiet, which suited me fine. I would sit behind the front desk, do some paperwork, sometimes check the cameras, sometimes watch videos on my phone when things were dead. The lobby was not big, just the front desk and a couple of armchairs on one side with a TV. Then some vending machines in the corner. Behind the desk was a small office where I had a computer, a chair, and a glass window so I could see the lobby even while I was inside. After midnight, the front doors locked automatically, so guests had to ring the buzzer and I would hit a button to let them in. Usually, nothing happened after midnight, except an occasional late check-in. But one night, this man walked in around 10:30 p.m., and everything about it still makes my stomach turn when I think back on it. He rang the buzzer, and I let him in. He looked to be in his early 50s, tall, kind of thin, but not overly so, wearing jeans and a baseball cap, carrying a backpack. He walked up to the counter and asked if we had a room for the night. I said yes and quoted the rate. He nodded and pulled out a card. I ran the card. The transaction went through, and I handed him a key card for room 118 on the ground floor. I remember he looked at me a beat too long. Before he turned to leave, he had this kind of blank expression, and his eyes stayed fixed on me for 3 or 4 seconds after I handed him the key. Then, he turned and walked toward the stairwell. Nothing about it screamed danger right away, but it was enough to make me notice him. After that, I sat back down and scrolled my phone for a while. Around 11:30 p.m., I looked up, and he was back in the lobby. He did not come to the desk, just walked past me and sat down in the armchair area. The TV was not on, but he sat facing it anyway. I figured maybe he could not sleep or something. Guests sometimes hang out in the lobby, so I did not think much of it. But after about 40 minutes, I realized he was literally just sitting there, doing nothing. Not on his phone, not reading, not even dozing off, just staring at the blank screen. At one point, I got up to grab a soda from the vending machine, and as I crossed the lobby, I could feel him turn his head and track me with his eyes. The whole way, I did not look directly at him, but I could feel his eyes on me. Until I got back behind the counter. It gave me an awful feeling. Around 12:30 a.m., I was checking the reservation system on the computer out of boredom, and that is when I noticed something off. I pulled up the list of occupied rooms and saw that room 118 showed as vacant. I muttered, "What the hell?" under my breath. Because I had literally checked that guy in less than an hour earlier, I figured maybe I had made a mistake. So I checked the check-in log, and there was nothing under his name. No record, no charge. Then, I pulled up the transaction screen to confirm his card had actually gone through earlier, and it showed no payment at all. I remember feeling completely confused, because I was sure I had swiped his card and heard the approval beep. But there was absolutely nothing in the system. That is when I grabbed the phone and called room 118. It rang about 12 times. No answer. Then, I checked the keycard access log, which shows whether that room's door was opened that night. And there was nothing. No one had entered the room. That is when it hit me, that he had never even gone up to the room after I handed him the card. I glanced toward the seating area, and there he was, still sitting there, staring at the TV that was not even on. I started feeling this horrible tightness in my chest. I stood there trying to figure out what to do. Part of me thought maybe the system had glitched, but the fact that the room had no check-in record and no charge made it pretty clear he was not actually a guest. I waited another 20 minutes, just watching him. Around 1 a.m., I walked over and asked if he was doing okay. He turned his head and looked at me with no expression at all, and told me he just could not sleep. Then, he turned back to the TV. I nodded and went back behind my desk, but my hands were shaking. By around 1:30 a.m., I noticed he was not sitting in the lobby anymore. My stomach dropped instantly, because I could not see him anywhere. I scanned the area, and then spotted him, standing at the end of the hallway near the restrooms, half hidden in the dark. He was just standing there, completely still. I kept glancing at him, pretending to be on the computer. He stood there for a while, then slowly walked back and sat down in the lobby again, like nothing had happened. I called my manager at home and explained what was going on. She sounded half asleep and told me to just keep an eye on him and call the police if he did anything threatening. I remember hanging up thinking that already felt threatening, but I did not know what else to do. After that, I checked the security cameras. I saw him on the upstairs hallway camera. He walked to the end of the hall, stood there for several minutes, then walked back. Later, he went into the stairwell and stayed in there for about 8 minutes. I have no idea what he was doing in there. Every time I looked up from the computer, he was somewhere different, near the vending machines or near the elevator. At one point, he was just standing in the corner where the light did not quite reach. He was always staring. At 2:45 a.m., I could not take it anymore, so I called the police non-emergency line and explained that there was a man at the motel I did not think was actually a guest. They said they would send someone over. While I waited, I noticed he had moved closer to the desk again, standing about 15 feet away, just watching me. He barely blinked, and definitely was not talking, just staring, like he had some kind of fixation. I pretended to type something, but I was so scared I could barely breathe. Around 3 a.m., the buzzer rang and I thought it might be the cops, but it was just another guest coming back late. I let him in quickly, and the man turned his head to track the guest with his eyes the entire way across the lobby. That scared me even more, because it was like he was studying him. A few minutes later, the man disappeared again. I checked the cameras and found him, standing right outside one of the guest room doors upstairs, literally just standing there. That is when I called 911. For real. I told them he was standing outside a guest's door, and I had no idea what he was trying to do. They said officers were already on the way. I kept my eyes glued to the camera feed, and he stood at that door for about 4 minutes, then slowly walked back to the lobby. This time, he came straight to the desk and leaned over it. He looked at me and asked if there was any food. His voice was so quiet, it was unsettling. I told him there were vending machines in the corner. He gave this weird half smile and stepped back. I sat there staring at the clock, praying for the police to show up. Finally, around 3:40 a.m., 2 officers arrived. I let them in and pointed straight at him. He was back in the seating area, sitting down. They walked over and talked to him for a few minutes, asked for ID, asked questions I could not hear. Then, they walked him outside. One of the officers came back in and explained that the guy was not a guest at all. The card he had used was stolen, and he had no luggage and no reservation. He had just been pretending to be a guest to get access to the building. They arrested him for trespassing and possession of a stolen card. After they left, I sat there shaking for the rest of my shift. Every time I checked the cameras, I half expected to see him again. The part that messed with me the most was realizing he had been inside the motel for hours, wandering around and standing outside guest room doors, watching me from different spots, when he never should have been there in the first place. I have no idea what his plan was, but I know it was not good. That was the scariest night of my life. My name is Clara. I am 22 years old, and I work the night shift at a 24-hour convenience store on State Route 4. It is the kind of place that, Drivers ignore completely, unless their tank is on empty, or their GPS has failed in the middle of nowhere. I took the job because I wanted something quiet with no surprises. That monotony comforted me, or rather I thought it did. It all started on a Tuesday morning around 2:15. The weather outside was muggy and heavy, and the relentless hum of the fluorescent lights on the ceiling was already triggering my migraine since the beginning of my shift. I was about to put an apple donut in the microwave when the entrance bell chimed. A man walked through the door. He must have been about 50 years old, maybe a little older. He wore a dark blue waterproof jacket, had messy gray hair, and lips so chapped they looked like they would crack if he tried to smile. He did not walk toward the beverage coolers or the snack section like normal customers. He simply stopped right in front of my counter, locking his eyes on me with a disturbing expression of intimacy. "Good evening," I said, forcing a friendly, professional tone. The man stared at me and asked, "Don't you think it's dangerous staying here all alone at this hour?" I blinked, caught off guard, and replied, "Well, yes. It's my standard shift." He gave a half smile. I figured. I've driven by this stretch of the highway a few times. I notice it's always you running the night shift. That sent an uncomfortable chill down my spine, much bigger than I showed at the time. "Oh yes, of course. Small towns are like that," I commented, trying to cut the conversation short. He just stood there, planted. "Your name is Clara, isn't it?" I froze. I wasn't wearing any badge or identification on my uniform. I was about to demand to know how he had that information, but he anticipated me, commenting that I had a very elegant handwriting. He pointed to the chalkboard on the wall where I had written, "Warm apple pie, fresh out of the oven." Almost everyone draws the letter A with that traditional rounded tail. You make a straight, clean, vertical line. It is a very striking trait. Very meticulous. I shifted my posture and said nothing. He didn't pick up any merchandise. He just stood there motionless for a whole minute, scanning me, evaluating every subtle reaction of my body. Finally, he nodded slightly. "My name is Arthur," he declared. "I just wanted to satisfy my curiosity. That's all." And then he turned around and vanished into the midnight fog. From that day on, the appearances became frequent but completely unpredictable. It wasn't every shift, not with a regularity that justified calling the police immediately, but it happened often enough to rule out any chance of coincidence. Sometimes he would come into the store. Sometimes he would just park his sedan at the dark edge of the lot with his headlights completely off, just watching. On one of those nights, I decided to give him the cold shoulder. He came in, picked up a can of soda, and stood in front of me, prolonging the moment. "You're very quiet today," he observed. Accumulated exhaustion, I cut him off dryly. He scanned the room slowly, as if mentally mapping the exits and the cameras. "It must be an immense loneliness, being isolated here in this darkness, with not a living soul for miles around," he commented. "I can take care of myself," I shot back. He leaned over the counter. "Don't you ever feel afraid, being a young woman alone in the middle of the night?" His tone did not carry an explicit threat, and that was exactly what terrified me. It was a tone of pure curiosity, analytical, as if he were making small talk about the weather. I took a step back toward the wall and asked, "Just the soda?" He tilted his head to the side. "You always make sure to lock the storage room door. Very prudent. I noticed you do that right around 3 o'clock in the morning on almost every shift." My stomach turned with terror. I remained in absolute silence. "I'll let you get back to your chores," he said, flashing a mild smile, almost apologizing for the trouble. "My intention was not to scare you," and he walked out with slow steps. After that episode, my routine turned into a living hell of paranoia. I would walk to my vehicle, holding my keys like a weapon between my fingers. I hid an iron bar right under the cash register. I changed all the blinds on my windows at home and started locking the bathroom door, even to brush my teeth, despite living completely alone. There were weeks when he would disappear. I would go 10 days without the slightest sign of him, but the disappearance brought no peace. In fact, it doubled the anxiety, because I spent every second waiting for the moment he would reemerge from the shadows. Like the day I walked away for a mere 5 minutes to use the restroom, and upon returning, I found a Polaroid photo on the counter. It was a picture of me from behind, cleaning the back area where the trash dumpsters are. It had been taken that very night from a shockingly close angle. There was no handwritten text but the letter A in the word exit engraved on the metal door in the background, and the letter A on the chalkboard had been circled with a red felt-tip pen. The next time he walked through the door, I lost control. I ordered him to leave immediately and warned him that if he stepped foot in here again, I would call the authorities. Arthur merely nodded, unfazed. I understand perfectly. I ended up crossing the line of your privacy. You're stalking me, I snapped, feeling my voice tremble against my will, and I hated myself deeply for showing that vulnerability. I just think you are a person who carries a deep sense of being misunderstood by the world. I imagined you would find it comforting to know that there is someone who truly notices you, he justified. That is not noticing someone. That is a sick obsession, I replied firmly. His face remained intact. Would it be more comforting if I feigned a banal interest and brought you a sweet every night? Would I fit into what you call normal if I talked about the basketball championship and pretended not to notice that you bought this jacket one size larger to hide inside it? Or that your right hand trembles slightly when you are under stress? By that point, my fingers were already desperately tapping the phone screen, completing the emergency call. He didn't move a muscle to try to stop me. The police car arrived in a few minutes, and he showed no reaction or attempt to flee. He just remained static, with his hands visible and his body relaxed, waiting to be approached. The officers searched the inside of his car and found a black notebook crammed with notes containing precise dates, days, and times. It was a meticulous mapping of my entire work schedule. There were detailed descriptions of my walk to work, the clothes I chose, the products I consumed. One of the pages contained only my name, written hundreds of times in overlapping lines and spirals that grew increasingly suffocating, until it turned into a dark blur of ink. He monotonously repeated the same justification to the officers. I just have an attentive eye. I'm just an observant man. The restraining order against him was issued that same week. Nowadays, the night shift is no longer part of my life. I've radically changed my geography. The convenience store chain accepted my request for a transfer to a branch in another region, nearly 3 hours away. But even now, when I'm driving back home, and I notice the same headlights keeping their distance behind my car for a long time, I feel a violent chill run up my spine. And on certain nights, the echo of his voice saying my name comes back to haunt my mind. As if he had been rehearsing that pronunciation for a very long time, knowing exactly how it felt to have it on his lips.